In 2018, the global trade landscape shifted as President Donald Trump launched a series of tariffs targeting major economic players like Canada, Mexico, and China. The tariffs, a cornerstone of Trump's America First agenda, aimed to protect domestic industries and reduce the U.S. trade deficit. The initial salvo included a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. This sparked immediate retaliation, with Canada and Mexico imposing their own tariffs on a range of U.S. goods. The trade war escalated further, as the U.S. imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, prompting retaliatory tariffs from Beijing. The tariffs on Canada and Mexico were eventually lifted as part of the renegotiated trade agreement, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. However, the trade war with China raged on, with tariffs remaining in place on a vast array of goods. These tariffs had a significant impact on businesses and consumers, leading to higher prices and supply chain disruptions. The tariffs also contributed to economic uncertainty, dampening investment, and slowing global growth. The trade war, initiated with the intention of bolstering American manufacturing and reducing the trade deficit, inadvertently opened the door for China to explore alternative routes to access the U.S. market. One such route led south to Mexico, where a complex interplay of economic factors and strategic maneuvering was about to unfold. Faced with mounting tariffs on Chinese goods entering the U.S., Chinese businesses sought ways to circumvent these barriers and maintain their access to the lucrative American market. Mexico, with its existing trade agreements and proximity to the U.S., emerged as a strategic alternative. Chinese companies began rerouting their goods through Mexico, either by shipping components for assembly or by setting up manufacturing operations within Mexico itself. This tactic, known as transshipment, allowed Chinese companies to bypass the tariffs imposed on goods directly exported from China. By routing their products through Mexico, these companies could take advantage of the USMCA's provisions, which allow for tariff-free trade between the three North American countries. This maneuver, however, raised concerns about the origin of goods and the potential for tariff evasion. The influx of Chinese goods entering the U.S. via Mexico brought about a shift in the trade dynamics, with Mexico's exports to the U.S. surging. This surge, while beneficial for the Mexican economy, fueled concerns among U.S. policymakers about the erosion of American manufacturing and the effectiveness of the tariffs in protecting domestic industries. In 2023, a significant shift occurred in the North American trade landscape. Mexico surpassed China to become the United States' largest trading partner. This shift, driven by a confluence of factors, including the ongoing trade war between the U.S. and China, underscored Mexico's growing importance as a manufacturing and export hub. Mexican exports to the U.S. reached unprecedented levels, exceeding $475 billion, a testament to the country's expanding industrial capacity and its strategic location. Several factors contributed to Mexico's ascent. The trade war between the U.S. and China prompted companies to diversify their supply chains and seek alternative manufacturing locations. Mexico, with its lower labor costs, proximity to the U.S. market, and established trade agreements, emerged as an attractive option. This trend, known as nearshoring, saw companies relocating their production closer to their consumer base, reducing transportation costs and lead times. The USMCA, which replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, further bolstered Mexico's position as a key trading partner. The agreement strengthened trade rules, promoted investment, and addressed concerns about labor standards and environmental protections. These factors, combined with Mexico's growing manufacturing sector and its strategic location, cemented its position as a dominant force in North American trade. As Chinese companies sought to circumvent U.S. tariffs and gain a foothold in the North American market, investment from China into Mexico surged. Industrial parks, like the Alianza Industrial Park near the U.S.-Mexico border, witnessed a significant influx of Chinese companies, particularly in sectors like automotive parts manufacturing. This investment boom transformed the landscape of these industrial zones, with Mandarin becoming increasingly commonplace alongside Spanish and English. The allure of Mexico for Chinese investors went beyond its proximity to the U.S.-Mexico's lower labor costs. Compared to China's rising wages, provided a significant cost advantage. Furthermore, Mexico boasted a well-established manufacturing base, particularly in the automotive sector, with a skilled workforce and existing supply chains. These factors made Mexico an attractive destination for Chinese companies seeking to establish a presence in North America. However, this surge in Chinese investment brought with it a wave of concern. US and Canadian policymakers voiced apprehensions about the potential for intellectual property theft, unfair trade practices, and the use of Mexico as a backdoor to flood the US market with Chinese goods, undermining the effectiveness of the tariffs. These concerns highlighted the complex interplay of economic interests and geopolitical considerations shaping the future of North American trade. North American unease, the USMCA under scrutiny. The surge in Chinese investment in Mexico and the subsequent increase in Chinese goods flowing into the United States market sparked unease among US and Canadian officials. Concerns arose about the potential for Mexico to become a backdoor for Chinese goods to circumvent US tariffs, undermining the intended effects of the trade war. This unease brought the USMCA, the trilateral trade agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico, under intense scrutiny. Lawmakers in Washington and Ottawa raised questions about the adequacy of the USMCA's rules of origin, which determine the national source of a product. They argued that the existing rules were not stringent enough to prevent Chinese companies from routing their goods through Mexico with minimal value-added processing and claiming them as Mexican-made to avoid US tariffs. This loophole, they argued, threatened to undermine the competitiveness of US and Canadian industries and erode the effectiveness of the trade agreement. The USMCA, due for its first formal review in 2026, became a focal point for addressing these concerns. Calls for stricter rules of origin, increased transparency in investment flows, and enhanced enforcement mechanisms to prevent tariff evasion gained traction. The review presented an opportunity to recalibrate the trade agreement to reflect the evolving dynamics of North American trade and address the challenges posed by China's growing economic footprint in the region. Caught in the crossfire, key industries grapple with uncertainty. The trade tensions and shifting alliances within North America created a climate of uncertainty for key industries operating within the region. The automotive and technology sectors in particular found themselves navigating a complex web of tariffs, investment flows, and geopolitical considerations impacting their supply chains, production decisions, and long-term strategies. The automotive industry, a cornerstone of the North American economy, faced significant challenges. The USMCA's stricter rules of origin for automobiles, designed to promote regional production, led to increased scrutiny of the origin of parts and components. The influx of Chinese auto part manufacturers setting up shop in Mexico, while offering potential cost savings, raised concerns about quality control, intellectual property protection, and the long-term impact on the competitiveness of US and Canadian auto parts suppliers. The technology sector also found itself caught in the crossfire. Concerns over national security and the potential for espionage fueled scrutiny of Chinese tech companies operating in Mexico, particularly those involved in sensitive areas like 5G infrastructure and data management. The US government's concerns about Huawei, a Chinese telecommunications giant, extended to its activities in Mexico with warnings about the potential for data breaches and security risks. Mexico's balancing act, economic boom, or geopolitical bust. As the trade war between the US and China raged on and Chinese investment in Mexico surged, Mexico found itself walking a tightrope, balancing its burgeoning economic relationship with China against its long-standing partnership with the United States. This balancing act required delicate diplomacy and a careful assessment of the potential risks and rewards associated with its deepening ties with China. On the one hand, the influx of Chinese investment and the rise in exports to the US fueled Mexico's economic growth, creating jobs and boosting its manufacturing sector. The Mexican government, eager to attract foreign investment and create employment opportunities, welcomed Chinese companies with open arms. However, this embrace of Chinese investment came with a price. The US, wary of China's growing influence in its backyard, exerted pressure on Mexico to curb its economic ties with Beijing. The Trump administration's threats to impose tariffs on Mexican goods if it did not stem the flow of migrants and drugs across the border served as a stark reminder of the leverage the US held over its southern neighbor. This pressure placed Mexico in a difficult position, forcing it to navigate the competing demands of its largest trading partner and a rising economic powerhouse. The road ahead, a trade triangle in flux. The future of North American trade relations remains uncertain, shaped by complex geopolitical forces and evolving economic interests. The trade war between the US and China, the surge in Chinese investment in Mexico, and the upcoming review of the USMCA in 2026 have created a fluid and unpredictable landscape, with each nation maneuvering to secure its economic future. The US, under the Biden administration, faces the challenge of addressing the perceived threat from China while maintaining strong relationships with its North American neighbors. Balancing these competing priorities will require deft diplomacy and a willingness to find common ground. Canada, traditionally a close ally of the US, has signaled its concern about Chinese influence in Mexico, suggesting a potential shift in its stance on North American trade if its concerns are not addressed. Mexico, caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug-of-war, faces the daunting task of leveraging its economic partnerships to its advantage without jeopardizing its relationship with the US. The decisions made by these three nations in the coming years will determine the future of North American trade and shape the global economic order for decades to come.